Today I'm joined by Jake Heenan. Jake is a player at the Bristol Bears rugby team. He is also an ambassador for Forged in Sport, and he is a co-owner of Burra, which is an Australian-New Zealand themed cafe here in Bristol. It has 3 locations. So for those that aren't familiar with your work, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in Bristol?
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, so I moved to Bristol 2018. I originally left New Zealand 2013 to play professional rugby in Ireland. Did 5 years out there, then moved to Bristol to join the Bristol Bears. So yeah, been here, played 7 years now. Just finishing up. This is my last season with Bristol, and yeah, sort of, I suppose, got into the community, got into Bristol and had a crack at a cafe and a few things, and sort of grew roots here,
Yeah, I was very impressed at the theme, obviously. A little bit biased coming from Australia myself, but it really is a different sort of style of cafe, I think, with the New Zealand flat white featuring and the community feel to it. It's very hospitable. How exactly did you come up with the idea for Burra?
Yeah, well, look, I agree. I think Australia and New Zealand cafes, I think they do it really well, particularly back home. So hospitality was a cafe was something I always wanted to get into. I enjoyed coffee. I enjoyed the idea. You'd go with your mates, midweek, relax. Enjoy coffee without sort of having to go to a pint, socialise, get off your feet, especially when we're training a lot.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that. And then what we wanted to do is we wanted to create an Australia, New Zealand style space with really good service, really good coffee, really good food. Just kind of try and elevate the level of service and product in cafes. And as you know, New Zealand, Australian cafes really pride themselves on their food.
Yeah.
So finding really good chefs, delivering a really good menu. I think specialty coffee is very accessible now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can walk down the road, you can find 10, 20 of them.
Yeah.
They're not... so having really good coffee that cuts well with milk, but then also complements food, I think is important. But then the big one, I think the one that we probably saw the most joy on, was creating a culture within our team which brought excellent service.
Yeah.
And I think we opened at the back end of COVID. People were crying out for social interaction, for a bit of personalisation, a bit of love. So creating a team and recruiting a team that can do that, and I think that's probably been one of our main points of difference.
I see that you went from conception to opening in 3 months. Is that true? And
Yeah.
how did you pull that off?
Yeah, so I don't think, I think in entrepreneurship you can fall into it. I don't think it's something you don't need. It helps to have a really, but I think if we were to open up the business plan that I wrote back then, I think we'd sit here and we'd laugh at it. Do you know what I mean? Like I didn't know what I was doing, so I knew what I was doing. So it's that model of really fire aim, So I think the basis, I read a great book from Michael Gerber, The E-Myth, The Entrepreneur Myth, that talks about why small businesses fail, right? Mm-hmm. And as I was reading it, I was kind of like, this is almost copy and paste what I've been doing. I didn't realise how much of my sporting career translated to business, and they were almost the same thing. And I was like, okay, well, I've effectively been doing an internship of this for the last 10 years. So that gave me a lot of confidence. I was like, I can do this. So shot Luke a message and said, oh, we opened a cafe. He said, yes, we opened a cafe. So so there was that side of it. There was that side of, okay, I know a lot of this stuff. I can do a lot of this stuff. But then the other side of it, and coming from sport, and I think an attitude which translates really well into business, is that idea that you're going to fail, you're going to get it wrong. You just have to keep improving. And if all you're doing is making incremental gains every week, every month, whatever it is, you'll be fine. So, and that was the attitude we took in. So we weren't afraid to get it wrong. We got it wrong quite a few times early on. But the fact we kept kind of moving forward and getting better was probably what allowed us to succeed.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was going to ask, you're no stranger to setback, come from a professional sporting career, injuries.
Yeah.
I can imagine it'd be quite a difficult period of time having an injury and not being able to do what you love but also it's your job. It's your And so, not many people go to work and have such high injury risk and the sort of mental stuff that you have to go through while you're waiting for you to recover. And the parallels that you've drawn there are spot on, and I think it's really cool that you've taken those setbacks that you've overcome in your sporting career and translated them to business. How much of this was something that you've always had, like you've always been a sort of an entrepreneurial person? Is that something that happened naturally, gradually, as you went through your career, or you've always been like that?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of it, like when I first took to rugby when I was kind of a teenager, never a super athletic bloke. So for me, I always took like the mental skills side of rugby, really enjoyed that. So how to really apply myself and, how to be consistent, because that's the thing in, particularly in business, is being consistent is everything. If you keep turning up and keep delivering, you'll get where you need to go, and it's quite a difficult thing to do. So that was one thing that I had to latch on to early, because pretty early in my career I learned I wasn't going to make it unless I did that. So I think it was probably a bit of how we were raised as well. I remember when I first sort of got a sniff in the door in the academy, and I was geez, I'm going to be a superstar, and the academy manager sat me down. He said, look, this line of work isn't for you. You should probably go focus on your studies, and I was like, that's not great. And anyway, I remember going home and talking to my old man. He said, did he drop you? I said, no. He said, well, you better go back to work then, and that was kind of it. So that attitude of, you crack on with it, and there's definitely it is. You learn a lot of that in sport. I think one of the best things I was taught from a mental skills point of view was learning how to fail.
Yeah.
As I sort of grew and I got really obsessive with being excellent, a psychologist sat me down. He said, mate, you're no good at failing. I said, well, of course I'm not good at failing. Why would I be good at failing? Yeah. That's the dumbest thing ever. But that idea that you're going to fail, and you'll fail over and over again, and the way he used fail was that you'll make mistakes, you'll get dropped, you'll have injuries, you'll have these moments, and unless you learn to deal with them, you'll never get any better, because those are your opportunities for growth. So, I had 3 back-to-back shoulder reconstructions, sort of 2014, 15, 16. Went into my last surgery. You may or may not play again. We open you up and see how we go, So one side of that was learning to get on with it. The other side was I kind of had to have plan Bs in place, So and then I think the other one that sport gives you is, you sit in meetings and you watch trainings and games together, and you get sort of called out in front of everyone. So you learn pretty quickly to grow a thick skin with that kind of thing. So that lends itself well to business, I think.
Yeah, definitely. What I was going to ask is, because New Zealand, maybe Australia culture is very much that, well, just, you're right, mate, get on with it. How did you find the cultural differences when you first came to this part of the world? Yeah,
so I think that the big thing I noticed is rugby it's a very private school sport, whereas it's almost in New Zealand, it's almost like football culture. It's here, everyone plays rugby, So there was, but then I suppose there was still that same, particularly when you got around the good players, like a high level of professionalism, guys wanting to succeed, guys wanting to do well. I think there are a lot of similarities in that way. I think in New Zealand it's probably a little bit more casual. She'll be right, we'll play and we'll be grand. Here it's I feel rugby's a bit more structured, it's a bit more detailed.
Yeah, right.
Which I really like. So, but yeah, culturally, I think there are a lot of similarities between sort of high performing people who want to do really well.
True.
And that was probably the one I latched onto and noticed the most.
Just to play professional sport, you've got to have a level of determination and stickability, because you're going to face setbacks, and as you said, get grilled in a room full of people when you make mistakes. How do you develop that? Is it just a matter of you turn up, you get grilled, and you just sort of deal with it after the fact, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's day by day, and that's the thing, and that's what is something that I think is really important to convey to people, because it's the same with Burra, and we look and we've got this incredible team of 35 staff. We started with a team of 4, you know what I mean, and half of them weren't very good. Do you know what I mean? It takes time, and it takes a lot of effort. So in terms of the rugby thing, it was literally a case of putting my best foot forward each day.
Yeah.
And I think back to when I was a young fella, and I think of the amount of players who were better than me, and they were everywhere. You know, it wasn't hard to find someone who played rugby better than me. But they just drop off, and they drop off, and they drop off, and as you keep getting better. So there was no big shock. There was no, like big sort of wow moment, and you're a superstar. And there might be for some guys. Certainly wasn't for me. For me, it was just chipping away each day. In sport, it's okay. Well, where do I need to get better? Well, I look at my pillars, and you look at things like strength and conditioning, nutrition, your game. Okay, cool. So in my game, where's my biggest area for growth, and even within that, what are the things I'm really good at? What are the things I need to work on? Yeah. Let's work on them both. Yeah. That kind of way. Obviously, when you're a young player, it's, okay, I need to get bigger and stronger. That's a big area of focus. Yeah. So all you're doing is just trying to chip away little by little at these things. And then again, it's something you talk about, but having conversations with people who have done it as well. And, for me, with mental skills coaches and people who could help coach you through some of the things that you're going to experience. And I really like the analogy of like putting someone in the flame, and it's that particularly young people that tolerance isn't very high. So you've got to pull them closer, and then you've got to pull them away. Yeah. So get involved in things of really high pressure and really high stress, but then be able to remove them from that so that they can grow. And I think that's a good way until you build that tolerance to live in that area of, where things are a bit chaotic and things are a bit stressful, and then you can sort of forge a career out of it. Yeah,
I think something you're really good at is people skills. You are really good at connecting with people and leveraging your connections. So I think that's worked out really well for you, both in the sporting world, but also in business. How important is it to keep your networks, and how do you grow them?
Yeah, mate, it's interesting. Like, it's something, I'm fortunate I enjoy it. I think some people get their coins from other people, and I'm certainly one of them. So the way I've always seen it is a couple of things. One, there's, everyone knows something that you don't, so therefore they're always in a position, to talk to. But I'm quite shameless with reaching out to people, and if I want to talk to someone and someone's does something better than I do, well, it's, hey, how you going? You want to catch up for a coffee? And people are really open with that, and you would have noticed that in Bristol as well. People in Bristol are great, particularly hospitality, and I think people want to share knowledge. I think they want to share ideas. And you never know where a conversation might lead to as well. So I see that in that, if you have a quadrant of things that are really important and things that are really urgent, it almost sits in that important, non-urgent. Yeah. And it's just having conversations with people, and whether that's your staff or your colleagues or your bosses, whoever it is, I almost feel that's the thing that gets left behind. Because we focus on urgent, right? We focus on the non-important urgent things and the important urgent things, and we often forget the things that are really important but aren't so urgent. So I think that's one, is trying to focus on having good conversations with people and just learning, right? Because that's how we keep moving forward.
I've noticed a theme throughout your public interactions, but also with dealing with your cafe, is you're able to step back and analyze those things, like what do people enjoy when they go to a cafe? Community. They want to feel welcomed. What is it that makes you be able to step back? Because not everyone can do that. Yeah.
I suppose I had the luxury with the cafe, at least, that I wasn't working there full time. True. That was one that I always had that little buffer, but and it's probably, again, something that came all the way back to that book I first read. The E-Myth was that, spend time working on your business rather than in your business. Yeah. Not to say you can't work in your business, particularly startups. I think it's unrealistic to think you can, create a lean startup and not work in it. But the idea that you want to be working, you want to create something that's bigger than any one individual. You want to create a system and a structure and a platform to allow people to step in and do a really good job. So that's kind of, one, something I really enjoy, but two, what I've learned to kind of doing the business. So, but it's hard. Like, it's really hard. We'll get a negative review on Google, and then it's like the blinkers come on. It's like, this is the worst thing in the world. You know what I mean? And then it's like a day later, you're like, this is a bit silly, and this is, you know what I mean, or whatever it is. And it's, but it's like anything, you know, that you're running. It is hard to step away, but I think it's an important practice to try and do anyway.
It's actually really interesting what you just said there, because I feel that a lot too at times. It's hard to separate yourself from what you're doing.
Mate, it's brutal. Yeah, it's brutal. But particularly when it's, you know, like yourself, like this is, you invest so much time and you know, like what you're doing, this is, you know, this is your personality. This is, you know, you're bringing yourself to this, right? Yeah. So it's, mate, it's really tough. I think for anyone who's starting something.
I've also seen a lot of superstars, even like Olympic athletes, where they'll get so invested in their sport, it's everything to them, and then when they retire, they're just like, nothing lives up to that high, you know. Yeah. They lose that community. And then it's just really hard for them to recover. I don't think you've got that problem.
No.
What do you think it is that younger athletes need to focus on to avoid that? Yeah,
there's a few. I think it's like identities, what you're talking about, right? Like that, right, yeah. You know, like you become so enwrapped in the sport and the idea of being an athlete that becomes who you are, you know. So I suppose you have to be aware of that first of all. And again, it can be tough, and we do exist in a bubble, you know, like when I'm playing with Bears, I get told what time I'm eating, you know, I get told where to be, when to be there, what to wear. It's nice, you know what I mean? I cruise around, and then you get celebrated on a weekend for chasing an oval-shaped ball around. You know, it's a bit ridiculous, but that's the bubble we kind of exist in. So I think being aware of it, I always found I was always doing something outside of rugby.
Right.
Like, I enjoyed my rugby more if I was studying or learning or doing some sort of project, because you do have time, you know. Our contact hours aren't super high, you know, particularly if you're injured or you're not playing. You've got a lot of time around your sport. So, that identity piece can be really difficult though. So, I think working on other things outside of it. I obviously had those, you know, those injuries and a few things that gave me that opportunity to sort of step back and reflect on who I was and what I was doing. But just always, and I suppose it's similar with any job or anything, is always trying to have different streams of communication and, you know, friends, you know, like yourself, you want different mates from different areas, and that more sort of diverse your thinking and around you, the more you learn and probably the more comfortable you are in your own skin, you know.
If you've got everything sort of done for you in a sense, what motivation is there to go and learn things for yourself? And you've obviously read a lot of books, and you go and seek people out. So what is it that drives you forth to actually want to learn more and do more?
Yeah, like I love learning. I think it's the first thing. You know, I've learned to really enjoy learning new things. I suppose I've really seen the benefit of it, you know, through my sporting career and outside of it. Like I've seen the benefit of knowing more people, knowing more things, and the opportunities it creates, because you often don't know where you're going to end up going, right? And you often, you start something, and Burra's another example. I had no idea in 4 years' time we'd be set where we are now. You know, I would have bitten your hand off for it, but I didn't know this is the direction we'd take. So, and it's similar to the Jim Collins sort of business model of like, first who, then what. You know, seek the right people, and in his example, employ the right people, and then find out which direction you're going to take. It's a bit of, well, it's fitting for life, really. Like you surround yourself with good people, and you don't know where the opportunities are going to come. You know, and you learn things, and you don't know what's going to stick and what's not. So, I suppose it just comes back to that theme of just trying to incrementally move forward, right? And whatever we're doing, whatever your interests are, and if you're sort of learning and taking more on, you'll have opportunities, and they will come up, you know.
Looking back on your life, what do you think the biggest lessons that you've learnt are?
Well, one of them was learning to fail. I think that's been one that's really stuck with me. I think one thing my brother actually told me when I was young, and he said, you know, you try and make good decisions, but if you're good to people, you'll be fine. You know, and that's one that's sort of stuck with me is, sort of prioritising relationships, prioritising people, because that's, that's where opportunities will come. And when your chips are down, it'll be your friends and people who will pick you back up and that. So I've never seen it like networking. I've kind of tried to see it like having good relationships and being good to people, and because that tends to always come back around.
Yeah. I definitely see that as a common thread throughout people that have succeeded. So if you've got 3 cafes that you're running, and you've also got professional rugby, you've got family, you've got so much going on, how do you find the time to fit it all in?
You're pretty busy. It was early doors was tough, particularly because me and my wife were working on it together, so you'd clash a bit there. But again, it was finding good people. There are a lot of people who are much better equipped to run Burra now than I am. People we've brought through and we've learned and work in the business, and our head barista, our head of ops, our head chef, like they're the ones driving the business forward, and that's, for me, that's like a super proud moment. That's something I always wanted. I wanted to create a space that find the right people, create a space, and then give them the culture and give them the keys to the shop where they can drive it forward and they can start to create what we wanted. So that's the big one at the moment, is finding good people. Because I think for me, like I have to keep the main thing, and if that's rugby, if that's family, whatever that is, sometimes it's Burra, but it's probably important to prioritise my time where I can, and but finding good people, leveraging their skills. Lots of people know a lot more and are a lot better at things than I am, so use them, and vice versa. You can kind of complement each other that way.
There's a good lesson there of getting out of your own way, and a lot of business owners struggle with that. They are too tightly involved with their business, and it just consumes them. But maybe it's an identity thing, as you said before. So just in entrepreneurship in general, what have you learnt going from one cafe to scaling to 3, and what advice would you give someone that wanted to start a new business?
Yeah, so again, and apologies to repeat myself, but coming back to that people element as well, so one of the things, we really wanted that high level of food, right? And we went through, I think, 7 chefs in about as many months trying to get our food there, and we were employing cafe chefs and we were getting cafe food. Yeah. And so it wasn't until we sort of sat back and thought, okay, we might need to try and find a restaurant chef here to drive it and spend a bit more money and do that. And it was one of the best decisions we ever made, finding someone who, Tori Yanada, who's formerly Michelin star experienced and fantastic at his job. But we needed to invest in, again, the right people to get us to where we wanted to go. So that's been one of the big ones. And I think the second one is just around organisational culture. One of the things I've learned, and I'm really strict on now, is finding A players for our team. Because A players don't work with B players. B players don't like working with A players. Right. So, for instance, Jared, me and you are working together, and you're doing a great job because you do, but I'm not. You have to compensate for my work, right? So you're having to do your job plus a bit of my job. And if I'm consistently doing this, well, you're going to leave and find another job. Right. Not me, because I can kind of get away with what I'm doing. Right, that kind of idea. But if you're trying to make me do more, well, then I'm getting upset. That's what I found, is they don't like working together. Yeah. Whereas if we're 2 good blokes and we do our job well, we get along really well, and and we build a healthy culture and a environment. And it's the same in sport. It's that, I think, while relationships and having care for people is really important for a culture, I think competence is equally important. Yeah, true. You can be the best bloke in the world, but if I'm not doing my job very well, you're going to struggle to get along with me. Sure. And in sport that reflects in quite hairy conditions on a rugby pitch. You need guys to be able to step up, and in business it gets really frustrating if people aren't pulling their weight. So that's the big one, is finding A players, really. Must
be hard to fire people.
It is. It is. It's not. It's not something I enjoy. I think it's a bit like running, where you get better at it, but it doesn't get any easier.
Yeah, right.
You know. So a great book I read, Radical Candor by Kim Scott.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about being able to be candid with people in the workplace, and again the quadrant, which is level of care versus level of directness and direct communication, and that idea that if you care a lot and you're direct, and that's where the magic happens. But the opposite to that is you care a lot about someone, but if you're not direct with them, it's that ruinous empathy where you actually do more harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I suppose has helped me with that, is that if someone's not doing a good job and I'm not honest with them about how I feel or what they're doing, I'm hurting them in the long run. If I allow them to adopt poor behaviours, I'm hurting my business, my other members of staff, but I'm also hurting that person.
Yeah, for sure.
We're not doing them any favours, right? So that's kind of, try not to fire people. There's obviously a lot of steps in between that to try and make them more aware and help them with training and get them better at their job before you kind of get down that road. But, once you've exhausted those options, I think it's the best thing you can do for a company if someone's not a right fit is just to move on from them.
Yeah. Your cafe is one of the more meticulous business plans that I've seen, as far as, you knew the sort of chef that you wanted, the sort of service you wanted, the sort of coffee, food, sourced it locally. A lot went into it, and in a short period of time. And I wanted to get your take on it, because there's also an argument to be made that in some ways planning too much is just going to give you analysis paralysis. So sometimes you just got to act. But then on the exact same token, with what you've done, you've meticulously planned everything, and then you've pulled off an amazing outcome. What do you think the balance is there between just getting things done and planning? Yeah,
mate, super interesting, and I think something that's sort of followed us right the way through. And I think what's really, we're very value driven, so we have our guiding principles, our values, which we live by. Outside of that, I'm really flexible with the business, so I guess we've got our North Stars. We've got, this is the direction we want to head, this is who we want to be, this is kind of our identity as a business. And then around that, we can pick and choose, and we can find things that work better in the business. So we're actually, I would say, we're pretty flexible in the way we do things, and often even the team now will change things and they'll move things. And I'll often say to them, like, I have no problem with them making calls and taking ownership for things in the business, so long as it's directed towards who we want to be, and what we want to do. So. I'm a big believer that the wrong decision is better than indecision. So you have to make calls, I think. Can't sit around and wait, and even that idea of like failing fast. If something's not working, like the worst thing that can happen to a business is to fail over the course of 12 years. Just slowly bleed. If you're going to do something, like obviously design thinking, try and test the waters and find your way in, but if you decide to go for it, it's 2 feet in, and we're going full charge ahead. We've had that and it doesn't work, and then it's like, great, we can rip that one up and go to the next. But so as long as we're moving towards or making decisions in line with our values, I'm not too concerned what they are. We obviously have to get everyone on board, and that's why for us it's really important our values are sort of communicated. We have them on our board so our customers can see them, but they're transparent, they're communicated amongst the staff. And then I'll often challenge, particularly our leadership group at the cafe, like, use your best judgment. You guys know this place, you know what we're trying to achieve, and if a call needs to be made, we'll make a call. So it is funny that, because I think another one, and probably to come back to that, like how we were planned, we knew the direction, like we wanted a simple offering. That was something that we've tried to keep things as simple as possible. I don't think you want to offer too many things and be too, so that's probably one thing in terms of appearing meticulous. But I think the reality is that we know who we wanted to be, and that we sort of found our way off the back of that.
You've really achieved exactly what you set out to do. The culture there is fantastic. I've been in a couple of times, and the staff are incredibly welcoming, which is great to know when you're not there that it's running well. The food is obviously incredible, and it honestly feels like being at home in Australia. That's exactly the same feel. You don't always get that with cafes, especially in somewhere that's very rainy all the time, a bit bleak.
Yeah, we found that, and I almost found early that, like, when I was here, specialty coffee almost came with bad service. Yeah. It was almost like it was, like, oh, we've got this really cool product and we're really cool, and I just really didn't like it. You know what I mean? I wanted somewhere that felt welcoming for everyone.
Yeah. What's the future hold for you?
Oh God, who knows? Who knows? So off to New Zealand, going to play some rugby in New Zealand, back where I grew up, my local province in Northland. Super excited for that. I can't say for certain, but that'll likely be, the last of my rugby, my body's. I want to call time on rugby before my body calls time for me. So, for me, like, excited to get back and do some work on Burra. Doing some work on this other program, Forge, sort of with athletes and business. But probably again, sort of living by the principles of trying to learn, trying to get better, meeting people, and seeing where opportunities take me.
If you could have your time all over again, what's one thing that you might change?
Look, there are a lot of things I could have done better, but I don't think there's much I would change. Definitely got things wrong, and I went through, when I was very young, I was probably rugby was too big a part of my life, and then I kind of went the other way for a little bit. But they're all things who have kind of brought me to where I am now, and I saw a quote I loved yesterday. I forget who it was from, but the moment of winning it's too short a moment to live for it. And that idea that in sport or business, having this outcome, this one outcome, and that's what we're going to do, and all you're doing is waiting for that, and then it comes and it's gone. And that idea that, like, life it's there to be lived, and you have to enjoy the process, you have to enjoy the time. So look, I've enjoyed myself and I've committed myself, and I suppose it's kind of led me to where I am now, in a place where we've got a business I'm really proud of. I've got a beautiful family, a beautiful home, like, great people around me, and I don't think I would do too much different. I probably could have made a few better decisions in my teenage years, but I did the best with the limited information I had. Like a lot of us.
I definitely think the doors are going to open for you left, right and centre, not just because you are who you are, but you have that gift, you have that talent, you have that skill to open people up. I think it's really cool. It's refreshing as well. Not everybody has that, and I think that wherever you end up, it's going to be an incredible journey for you.
Well, mate, I might come knocking for a job. Who knows? Who knows how we'll go? But
well, I must say it's been a pleasure having you, Jake. Thanks for coming in, and can't wait to see what the future holds.
You didn't. Thank you very much.
Cheers.